All right, good evening everyone. Thanks all of you for coming out tonight to this town hall meeting for Wills. For those of you who I haven't had the fortune to meet personally yet, my name's Peter Khalil and I am the federal member for Wills, the relatively new federal member for Wills. I should note that I plan for tonight to be not only the first of many similar events that we're going to conduct to promote a conversation between myself, the elected representative and the people of Wills. We're already planning a forum on the arts in November, arts policy, and in subsequent months we would like to have policy forums or town hall meetings, whatever we want to call them, on a whole range of areas important to Wills and to the nation, such as climate change action, the NBN, and also marriage equality, just to name a few. So I'll be endeavouring to get the relevant shadow ministers out to these events as well, because I'm just a local MP, backbencher, humble backbencher. So I also hope to hold another meeting on tonight's issue, because it is a very important issue. So please keep an eye out on Facebook, on my Facebook page, for updates, or if you're interested in any news, receiving news by email, feel free to sign up. There's a sign up sheet up the front or a mailing list at the door, and we'll send you all the info about these upcoming events or anything else that's important in Wills. So I am your representative and a member of the federal opposition, and that's why I come here tonight and we're having this policy forum. And I want to just stress that any and all points of view are welcome tonight. I, for one, am prepared to hear you out, and whether you agree with me or not, or whether I agree with you or not. I just ask that when we do get into the discussion stage and the Q&A stage, that everyone has a respectful dialogue from everybody here this evening, and we respect each other and our views. We don't have to agree with each other, but at least respect that people have the right to their views. I'd like to make just a few remarks before I hand over to and introduce Lily Partland from Save the Children, a great organisation, and she's graciously accepted my invitation to also address the forum tonight and tell you a bit about the work that Save the Children has done and does do for asylum seekers and refugees. And then we'll conclude with the Q&A. For probably about 30 to 45 minutes, we'll have an opportunity to ask questions and have a discussion. Since my election earlier this year, I've spent a considerable amount of time talking with constituents in Wills about a whole range of policy issues. Particularly prominent among those issues has been obviously the issue of asylum seekers and refugees. It's an issue that I know weighs very heavily on the conscience of the people of Wills, but I also know, and I believe it weighs heavily on the national conscience as well. So it's fitting that the focus of the first Wills policy forum in my tenure as the member for Wills should be on asylum seeker and refugee policy. And I know that all of you are here tonight because you actually care. You actually believe that we can develop more humane and compassionate policies. A significant portion of my inaugural speech to the Australian Parliament just last week, my first speech, was focused on asylum seeker and refugee policy. So I encourage anyone here tonight to check that out if you haven't seen it, because I do sort of pour out my views and pour out my heart on that. It's a very personal speech as well, in some respects, that first speeches are. And we can also give you a copy of the transcript if you wanted a copy. But you can get it on my Facebook page and have a look. I would say that tonight should be above partisanship and beyond politics. I say it should, but I know that it will be very difficult, because this issue, asylum seeker and refugee policy, the policies and the solutions are inherently political. However, I do believe that the moral imperative to address this genuine humanitarian crisis calls for us to attempt, albeit temporarily, to set aside our political and ideological differences and come together to adhere to a common objective, one we can all agree on, and that is to save people's lives. And I don't mean to be hyperbolic by saying that, but it is about saving lives, and it is about preventing terrible human suffering that is going on. There are 25 million people 25 million asylum seekers and refugees in UNHCR camps around the world. There are 65 million displaced people on this planet. Now, when I think of those numbers, my mind really struggles to fathom that number. You know, it's almost 100 million people. But as much of this can be viewed in those types of numbers or statistics, and when we do that, we can tend to lose sight of the fact that we are debating policies that have a direct impact on the well-being and the lives of fellow human beings, and they are individuals and they are families as well. And they're people no different from my parents who came to this country from Egypt to escape a region that was torn by war. So this issue is extremely close to my heart, and it is personal. I think we should all make it personal, actually, because it helps us fight harder. And just a few acknowledgements, which I didn't do at the start, and I know how important it is for people with this issue, like the Grandmothers Against Detention who are here tonight and who I've met with many, many times on very freezing cold mornings at the train station as well. Helen's here and many of the other grandmothers. Many of you, all of you here too, for various reasons, whether you come from countries where there are many refugees and asylum seekers, or you're passionate about helping these people, you're all making this personal. It is personal in many respects. I've been involved with the issue for over 10 years in various respects during my career as well, and I've been an advocate for more humane and compassionate policies to deliver upon what I believe to be really a moral and ethical obligation that Australia has to play a more substantive role in achieving solutions to the crisis that we all face. So before I was elected to, for instance, before I was elected to Parliament, and before I even knew I was going to run for politics and for Parliament, a year ago, just last September, on my own steam, I went to New York during the United Nations General Assembly period. So it's happening now again a year later. And I was there lobbying some of the different UN members and the contacts that I had developed through my career in foreign policy at DFAT and so on a policy that would, or a safe transport policy that would help move some of the 4.1 million refugees in the camps in Lebanon and Jordan to countries that had already increased their quota, the EU countries that had increased their intake. It was a simple thing, but I was trying to push the idea that we could provide movement of those, expedite the processing for those refugees and move them safely to those countries rather than see the terrible things that we saw when they died on the Mediterranean or they were suffering at the borders of Hungary and in Central Europe. So we're all aware that President Obama is hosting a summit right now as we speak, this week at this year's United Nations General Assembly. When I was a research fellow at the Brookings Institute, I actually had the opportunity to meet him when he was then Junior Senator Obama, and when I testified before the US Senate Foreign Relations Committee on security policy in the region, in the Middle East. And I was struck then by his intelligence and his commitment to pragmatic solutions at the time. And I know that this theme is continuing, and the summit he has convened is an attempt, at least, to foster an ambitious compact on the refugee crisis amongst the member nations. It has left out a number of things, and we'll discuss that tonight. However, it is disheartening to see that amongst this coming together of some ambition, our Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, is quoted as calling Australia's existing intake levels, and I quote, generous. He's also said that, and I think this is pretty condescending, these tones, that we need to, and I quote, see the world clear-eyed as it is, not as we would like it to be or as we fondly imagined it once was. So I fundamentally disagree with that, and he said that at the UN just last night. I fundamentally disagree with that viewpoint because I believe that we must always see the world as we want it to be. I mean, how else can we strive for change to make things better unless we can imagine a better future and a better world? So we have to have that imagination. He also went on to say that asking wealthier countries to increase their humanitarian intake, and I quote, can never come close to being near enough. I think Mr. Turnbull is wrong on that note, on that point too. Well may Turnbull say increasing the refugee intake can never come close to being enough. I must say to the PM, it is nowhere near enough. It's a bit of Whitlam there, some of you kind of bordelarised Whitlam, but anyway. Gough used to call me when I was an advisor, when I was foreign policy advisor to another Labor PM, and he was 92 and he used to give me some great advice, but that's another story. He did influence me, obviously. Well, I think it is, a step forward to lock in the intake of 18,000 refugees per year, which is just done to make that permanent. I still believe it's nowhere near enough. And I know I promised not to be partisan, but I'm trying. And I do know our leader, Bill Shorten, also in his comments yesterday, he confronted the elephant in the room and he rebuked Turnbull for the hoax of reheating Abbott government policies and ignoring the almost 2,000 people that are trapped in indefinite detention on Manus and Nauru. Now, that you should all look up the statements that Bill made yesterday because he went on the direct attack on that and highlighted what was happening on Manus and Nauru and the need to find a solution for that. And he once again called on the Turnbull government to actually negotiate a resettlement to get these people out of detention. Now, I know it's been said that Australia takes the third largest number of refugees, but really you can cut these numbers anyway. If we did it based on GDP, or we did it based on population, we wouldn't be the third. We'd be a lot lower down. And we are, this stat alone shouldn't put us at any ease with the status quo. We should be trying to make a real difference, and we are the 12th largest economy in the world. I believe we can do much, much more. The weight of this refugee, or Australia's refugee intake, is really put into that proportion with the full global scope of the issue. Even if our current intake under the coalition government, inadequate as it may be, was increased by a factor of 10, we would only alleviate the suffering of only a minuscule fraction of the world's total displaced people. So Turnbull's kind of right on that point, but his lack of vision about what to do about it is really what alarms me. And it's from this perspective that I've been advocating and arguing and formed the view that we need to have 10, 15, 20 nations coming together and agreeing to take an additional 30, 40 or 50,000 refugees each, which would then really begin to approach the sort of meaningful solution that this crisis requires. And the operative word here is solution. While every action has an impact and every life saved is a victory, it's countries like ours, relatively prosperous, stable and safe, with good diplomatic access, which suggests that we should be setting our goals higher than they have been set. We can't do it alone, but we can take a leadership role. And this is the role that Australia is best placed to play, in my view. And we see the dog whistle of politicians on the far right continuing to play the same tune that they've played during the Howard years. Only last week, Tony Abbott was quoted as saying that the influx of asylum seekers into Europe, heading for Europe's shores, was akin to a peaceful invasion. A peaceful invasion. Now, if you use trigger words like that, you continue to fan the flames of fear amongst the population. Yet, of course, we have Hanson and Trump dominating the news cycle. And all this tells me that we're at a point really where we face a fractious body politic, and it's exacerbated, or perhaps it's really driven by the ugly rise of these demagogues. And they're charlatans who pull from their sleeves the same three-card trick they've played throughout history. First, they identify an angry